Hello, Jocelyn Sia here. Welcome back to another edition of Ladies Who Bond. Today's special is a guest whose voice may be very familiar to the Bond community. She is a co host of another James Bond podcast with Corey Kraft and is one of the very first ladies I interacted with in the Bond community. She is Q's biggest fan and likes to tell it how it is. Welcome, Danielle Duquette.
Hi, how are you?
Good, how are you?
I'm good, thanks.
Thank you for coming on here and chatting
Oh,
with
no
me.
problem. No problem.
So, for those who are not familiar with your podcast, could you please share with us what it is all about?
So, our podcast is another James Bond podcast, and I'm a co host with my partner, Corey Kraft. We kind of started out because Corey's a big Bond fan, and we'd started going through the Bond films in order, and there was a lot to talk about, a lot to joke about and laugh about, and we were kind of getting into it. So we went through the Connery phase, and we kind of thought maybe we should start a podcast about our conversations on the film. So right now, most of our episodes are us watching a film, breaking down what happens. It's pretty lighthearted. We kind of poke fun. Neither one of us is a big Bond expert or anything, so we probably get a lot wrong, but we do have a lot of fun doing them.
And you guys had me on for one of the episodes, and
Man,
that was a lot
gun.
of fun.
It was fun. It's definitely not one of my favorite Bond films, but it's always fun to record the episodes, whether or not it's a film that you enjoy. There's always something to talk about.
But he should be okay though because he took the time to have his legs dried off by Maud Adams when he got out of the water. She dried his legs off. She purposely dried his legs off.
I did notice that.
What is that?
Well, that's what we do when we swim.
Yeah, and then she continued to dry off more.
I like how they pat his chest around the. Do you want to say it? Because I know you're dying to say it.
Here's his third nipple. That's
Yeah.
like not even 5 minutes into the movie, and it's like bam, right there in front of you.
Yeah, exactly. I did laugh at that though because they're drying him off and they're patting it basically like it's gonna fall off on camera. Let's like pat very cautiously around that third
It's
nipple.
just suction. Be careful.
Yeah.
Because you guys started this podcast, and with Corey being the Bond fan, last February, you and Corey attended Operation Skyfall,
Yeah.
which was the gathering of Bond fans, and you guys went to go see Skyfall in concert. Was it your first time attending a Bond fan gathering?
It was the first time for both of us.
Oh,
Um,
okay.
yeah, so I lived in Toronto for years, so it was fun to go back to my old stomping grounds. It was our first opportunity to sort of meet people directly in the community, which was great. Both of us are kind of shy, awkward people, but everyone there was really nice, super welcoming, so it was a good time.
Did you feel comfortable attending, even though you're not the Bond fan?
You know what? I felt a little like nervous through all of our recordings because I think I make it pretty clear that there's some stuff I really don't like about certain films. And anytime we finish recording, when I kind of go on a tangent about that stuff, I'm always worried that someone's going to kind of come back at me about it. But the community's been very welcoming, and I've never felt like anyone was kind of questioning my belonging there. I think for the most part, again, the community's super welcoming, and if you're interested, they'll welcome you with open arms, whether you've watched one film or all of them.
I feel it's um kind of the same for me, just being in the community and interacting with people. I mean, I appreciate everything that you talk about on your podcast. Whether or not I'm some things I may not agree with, but at the same time I think having the diverse opinions really makes it, food for thought, give people something to think about, so it's not so streamlined. Um which, I mean, that's how the world is in general altogether. Just
Right.
having a difference of opinions and just talking about these things and having these discussions.
Yeah. I mean,
Definitely.
Corey and I don't always agree on things, even when we're sitting across the bar from one another having these conversations, and that's fine as well. Like we have different opinions and different preferences, but I think it just makes the conversation more interesting.
Yes, I agree.
Yeah.
It might be a while until we will be able to gather again. But when we do you have any advice for those who aren't Bond fans who end up tagging along with their um, Bond fanatic partner to events?
I think if you so I think if you want to have fun, find something about Bond that you do like. I mean, I'm pretty vocal about my thoughts about kind of opening up the Bond franchise a little bit more to women. But I do think there's something to appreciate in for everyone in the films. So even if it's just the outfits, the drinks, the atmosphere, like just find something you enjoy so it'll give you common ground with the people that are there. So even if it's not really your thing, you can still have a good time and talk to the people that are around you.
That's some pretty good advice.
Mm-hmm.
So let's dive into James Bond a little bit here. You are
There's no
probably
trivia, right?
no, there's no trivia.
Okay.
No, it's okay. I'd be on the same page with you. I'm kind of terrible at trivia. Um, so you are the only person that I know who is a big fan of Q.
Really?
And yeah, I'm sure there are other people who like Q, but you're pretty vocal about how much you love Q.
Yeah.
And I love that because I feel that Q doesn't get enough love sometimes. You know, we're like, oh, that's nice, you know, and then just move along. But what do you like most about Q?
So I feel like Bond is sort of the person who breaks the rules to get to the end point. So he sees his mission as the final thing he needs to do, and whatever he needs to do to get there, he will. Whereas Q is very focused on the rules. So he has his gadgets and he has all these things to help Bond, but like there are certain ways for him to act, there are certain ways to use his gadgets. He wants everything to come back in shape. And I'm very much a rules person in life. Like I don't jaywalk, I don't speed, and like when I see people doing it, I'm like, oh my God, that you shouldn't be doing that. So I really connect with Q on that level. And like Bond does some things that give me heart palpitations because I'm like, oh no, you're going to get in trouble for that. You're going to get fired. Like job security is important too. So I think I connect with Q on that level where I feel like Q's very like, okay, by the book, by the rules, but he's still funny and he's still fun. So I think I maybe see myself a little bit in Q, except for like the engineering gadget part. I have no skills in that at all.
Do you find your opinions shift? You know, I mean, we've only had two, three Qs, but you know, between because you have seen Daniel Craig movies already, right?
I have, yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
Do your opinions of Q differ between the two?
I think I haven't, other than Skyfall, I haven't seen any of the Craig films since we started this. So I think I'm going to have to watch them to really give my opinion on that. I'm thinking it's going to be hard to shift because like original Q is still in my heart, so it might be hard to let go of them.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Do you have any favorite scenes with him?
Um, there's one scene. Oh, which film is it? See, this is where I'm really terrible at things, but pretty much any scene with Connery, I think was really good. They had such a good chemistry. And like as soon as Connery walked into the Q lab, he would start getting like all ADD where he would be touching everything and pushing every button, and Q would just be like slapping his hand away. And I just found they had such a great chemistry. So pretty much any scene with Connery was really good. A Thunderball in particular, I think.
Yeah. It's like corralling cats, I guess, right?
Pardon me?
It's like corralling cats. You know, the cats are like,
Right, exactly. Like
yeah,
trying to get into everything, and you're just like, control yourself, you might explode something. Yeah.
yeah. Um, so it might be a possibility with Daniel Craig's move. You know, like we have No Time to Die, and then that will be the end of the Daniel Craig era, which means that we hopefully will get a new era, a new Bond actor. And the topic of having a new cast for MI6 is also in question. If the next Q is a woman, what character qualities would you like to see?
I'm not like I like the idea of change for the franchise. I do think that if the character is a Q woman, or if the Q character is a woman, I think we should kind of. I would like them to kind of keep the same essence of it, where it's a more serious character that just is trying to get Bond to like, okay, follow the instructions. Please listen to me for 5 minutes. Like I know you want to run off with this new toy, but like so I'd like to see that still, where it is a pretty serious character, but still has a bit of comedic relief to it. Yeah.
Yeah, that I guess that comedy is pretty important. Like just that a little bit of that banter.
Yeah, like no slapstick or anything like that, but just a
Yeah,
little bit witty kind of back and forth is always nice.
I agree. Yeah, it could be interesting if we get a woman. Like I kind of think about like what are the possibilities, and don't disregard that because I mean I feel like with the MI6 party, for the exception of maybe Moneypenny, like the characters like we could change their gender, and then it would. I mean we already did that with M, obviously.
Hmm.
Um, so it kind of I feel like it gives more dynamic to explore, between Bond and the other characters in that sense.
Yeah, and I've heard Bond, like the whole Bond franchise, described as like a male fantasy kind of thing, which I understand. But at the same time, I do think if you want the franchise to continue and still be big, like you have to bring women in. Like we're half the population, so we might as well participate if you want to keep the numbers big. So I do think there are ways to sort of bring that interest in, and a more diverse cast might be the answer there.
Well, since you've been watching all of the movies up to where you are now, do you feel that the Bond franchise has done a good job? I mean, has your opinion shifted, starting with the Connery era? Has it like changed up to where you are in the movies?
Uh, so the Connery era is probably one of my favorite. But I also acknowledge that there's a lot of problematic stuff going on in those films. And we can all say, like, oh, well, it was the times. It still doesn't make it okay. Um, but it's still, like, in terms of the cast and all that, it was one of my favorite eras for Bond. But I think it has evolved. And it's funny because we're doing the Brosnan era right now. And like that's when I grew up, right through the 90s into the 2000s. I was like teenage years becoming an adult, and I'm seeing a lot of things that I remember seeing back then, when we pretended that women and men were being treated equally when it really wasn't the case. And you kind of see it in those films where they're like trying to make it seem like men and women are really equal, but like it was an idea that was being pushed without the reality actually being that. So it's kind of interesting to see those times play out. Um, it is evolving for sure. I think there's a lot of stuff that we see even in the Brosnan era that we don't see in the Craig era. So I think it's evolving with the times up to a certain point.
Yeah. Um, I had a thought and it just escaped me. So sometimes I feel like because I too grew up with the Brosnan films that there were some things in that era that I was like, oh, that was a little, where I felt they tried and then they ended up dropping the ball.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that was kind of what the 90s were. Like, women were told you have achieved equality, stop talking now, like stop talking about it. And you kind of see that in the film. And there's a few, I think for sure in the first two films where M says something about like, you don't think I have the balls. And I do comment on that in the podcast where it's like, you're a woman, like why are we using this expression still? You are who you are, like you don't have the strength, you don't have the courage, but like why are we calling it that? And I think that was just part like instead of women being equal, it was women being like men. And you really see that in the film, and it's a little uncomfortable, but I think it's uncomfortable because I remember going through that as a teenager.
Yeah, yeah. It kind of makes me wonder where the new movie is gonna go,
Hmm.
because like they've got a lot of women um casted and they brought like Phoebe Waller-Bridge, so I kind of wonder how things are going to turn up with this, you know, and I feel because we've had such a huge gap between Daniel Craig movies, like that in itself has like, you know, shifted between like where we were with Casino and what might come out of this movie. Like
Yeah.
I don't really know what's going to happen, but I feel there's been like a big evolution.
Yeah. Yeah. Through time. I mean, a lot of time has passed, so everything shifts culturally as well.
Yeah. Yeah. I was just listening to another podcast. Oh, I think it was the Double O Files, and the one with I think with John William, and he was talking about how like the span of the Daniel Craig era was like when like one movie came out, he was engaged, and when another movie came out, he was married, and then when another movie came out, he had kids, and it was like, oh, that's actually a huge gap.
Yeah. Yeah. For sure.
Yeah. Um, so the only Daniel Craig movie then you've seen is Skyfall, right?
I've seen all of them.
Oh,
The
okay.
most recent was Skyfall, and I forget every film I watch pretty much as soon as we finish recording the episode, or like I'll watch a movie and then fight with someone for 2 weeks about I never saw that before. So I have seen them. Do I remember them? Not a lot. Like Casino, I've seen a bunch of times, so I do remember that one pretty well. But the rest of them are going to be pretty fresh for me because it's been a long time since I've seen them.
Okay. So then do you think, you know, having seen that and you'll be revisiting that and then starting with Connery and you and Corey going through all of this, do you think that the Bond franchise has evolved their representation of women and what advice would you give to Eon in representing women in the franchise for the future?
So I think it definitely evolved. The women are stronger characters and are, well, they're actually characters instead of just being like this unidimensional being that's just there for their looks. So they actually have backstories and they have emotions other than like immediately falling in love with Bond. Like it's not something we see so much. So I think there has been a really nice evolution. I do think having more women as like main characters that are really strong that don't necessarily fall in love with Bond, because that can happen, right? I mean,
Yeah.
I've met men that I haven't fallen in love with. It's happened. It can happen. So I think that might be a bit key where like he's just a human being. Like, sure, he's awesome. He has a lot of very interesting qualities that other people don't necessarily have, but he's still just like he's fallible. He's just a man. So like everyone on the street's not swooning over him. There will be a handful of people who aren't. So I think maybe having those sort of like stronger characters that are on par but are not a love interest, and keeping those characters strong through the film.
Like that's kind of like I don't know if you've read any of the Bond novels yet.
I started reading one and then no, I haven't. I've read like 3 chapters in one. It's actually something we are thinking about visiting in the podcast, and more than likely I will be reading them, but no, I haven't.
Okay. Well, one of the novels, Moonraker, the female, the Bond girl, she doesn't fall in love with Bond.
Hmm.
So, I actually prefer that. I guess I don't want to spoil it too much if you're going to be visiting it, you know. But
I'll
I
probably
really,
forget, so spoil ahead.
okay. So, you have there's a character called Gala Brand, and she's like the scientist that, and the Moonraker novel is completely different from the book. It's like they're not even close. Unlike some of the other books are pretty good, but so you have Gala Brand, and she's working as a spy, and she ends up working with Bond, and then at the very end of the book, she Bond thinks that he's going to sweep her away and they're going to go on vacation and recover from their, you know, their mission and whatnot. And she's like, actually, no, I'm leaving and getting married to my fiance. And
Hmm.
so she just leaves Bond, you know, and he doesn't end up with her. So I guess it's a little bit different in the sense of like there was a little bit of romance, you know, a little bit of flirtation that happens in the book, but in the end, she still leaves,
Right.
and they don't end up together, and And I don't think we've had very many characters in the franchise that have done that, so to speak. So it'd be nice. Like there are like so many different relationships between at different levels. Like you don't have to boink every single thing that you see.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think the films, a lot of them do just that, where it always turns into a love interest, even when you're like, there's no way, like this is not how that works, but it almost always turns into a love interest at some point. And I mean, give the people what they want, right? People want chemistry, people want that kind of more romantic side to it as well, where um, like Bond is a playboy as well, so fine, but again, it wouldn't work on every single woman that crossed his path.
Right, right. I mean, they could explore things more of like a almost like a brother sister, or a comrade sort of relationship too. Like I don't think that they really cover that too much. I mean, the closest we get is between like Bond and Felix.
Yeah. Yeah, like Bond befriending someone and actually revealing a little bit about like what does Bond do on a Friday night when he's home alone? Like what does he do? Does he have fuzzy slippers in the bathrobe? And like does he drink Mike's Hard Lemonade while watching, I don't know, Golden Girls reruns? He probably has interests we don't know about, so it'd be nice to learn about that. I mean, what I said right there is probably not what he does, but it was just an example.
It's kind of a funny image. Bunny slippers. So, as of today, the most recent podcast is up to The World Is Not Enough.
Hmm.
And then soon you will be reaching towards the end.
Yep.
So, what plans do you and Corey have next?
So we have a lot of ideas actually, because we've been discussing that quite a bit about what we wanted to do, and we're kind of thinking of going in a different direction than the films and the books next. I mean, we probably will revisit some of the films. I think we can definitely watch them with a different perspective once we've actually gone through the whole catalog. We do want to talk about the books, but I think we're going to talk about a lot of lifestyle things as well. Um, Both Corey and I talk a lot about how your job, for most of us, our job isn't like we work to live, but also having pastimes that you're passionate about is really important. So I think we want to visit a little bit of that, like how we can incorporate sort of Bond lifestyle things in our everyday life, and how we can feel maybe a little bit more in control of our life by doing so. So I think we're going to look at some lifestyle things moving forward.
Well, that's pretty interesting. So, I mean, since Corey is kind of like the Bond fan between the two of you, like, have you found parts of his fandom seep into your life, or have you accommodated, his fandom, in the household, or
I think his thing with the fandom, like he likes the films and all that, but he really loves the Bond clothing. So he does have his budget Bond page where he shows examples of like similar clothing to what Bond would have worn, but that you don't have to pay an arm and a leg for. And I think that's kind of representative of who we are. Like we're not rich people, we can't afford all the Bond things, but there are ways to incorporate certain things into your life without spending all that cash. So, I mean, he likes the shoes and the jackets and things like that. So those tend to appear in the closet every now and then. I have not started dressing like a Bond woman. I don't think that'll ever be a thing for me. Although there are some clothing that are really nice. A lot of it's like super fancy ball gowns that I'll never have an occasion to wear anyway. So that side of it is more his thing than mine.
do you guys drink a lot of martinis?
No, not really. I mean, I'm
No.
drinking one right now. But it's like once a week, usually when we record, we'll
Mm.
have one, or maybe like when we watch the film. That's pretty much it.
Do you remember the first time he told you that he was into James Bond?
I knew it was something that he was interested in because he had a little bit of paraphernalia. I kind of found out by accident though, because he started his budget Bond page without really saying anything. And then all of a sudden he started talking about going to like a fan gathering. I forget where it was, and like being in touch with all these people in the Bond community. And I was like, I didn't even know there was a community for that. And then he kind of told me that he had started the budget bond thing and it was actually going pretty well. So that's how I found out. And I'm not the kind of person who necessarily has to do everything that their partner does, but this was a big interest for him. So I was like, well, let's watch the films. I want to see what it's all about. Like, why is it so interesting? So that's kind of how this whole project took off.
And you're not overwhelmed or afraid or annoyed by all of his fandom.
No, I get annoyed by the editing we need to do for the podcast. Other than that, no. I mean, most of the annoyance comes from the fact that there's never enough time in a day to do everything we want to do. Um, I do find the Bond community great. I find the films really fun. So no, it's pretty enjoyable for me. And he's not someone who needs to own every gadget and every piece of clothing. I think if that was it, like it would go beyond our lifestyle abilities. So that would be a problem. But it's not like that at all.
Well, it's really great that you've been so supportive, like with his fandom, and participating, with all of it too. Uh, I mean, I think it gives a great, viewpoint, like within the community of just like hearing your thoughts, from almost from like an outsider's perspective. It's kind of like you're inside the community, but because your fandom isn't like you're not the big Bond fan, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
it's also like an outsider's perspective, and I find that really interesting. And I think it's needed too, because sometimes I think about like get people who are dating or like want to date, and they're like, how do I explain to my friend, or my partner, like I'm really into Bond, and like some people feel really afraid, like, oh my God, this is such a nerd thing, but I think about it, and I'm like, well, there are like people who love Star Wars, and it's the
Right.
same thing.
Yeah. I think we all have our things that we really love that to an outsider might look a little strange. Like I listen to a ton of true crime podcasts. I read a ton of true crime books. I have my own true crime podcast. So, I mean, that would be weird to a lot of people as well. But I think being supportive, obviously, you have to strike a balance. It can't be your whole universe, especially if your partner's not into it. I mean, there has to be limits, but I think everyone's allowed their own interests. And I mean, Corey also comes on my true crime podcast, even if it's not his thing.
Oh,
Sometimes I
that's
need a
nice.
co host, so he is co hosting with me. So he supports me as much as I try to support him for sure.
That's fantastic.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's what makes a really good relationship, right?
I hope so.
Yeah. So, I like to end with one final question for you. This is kind of similar to a Dear Abby situation, asking for practical life advice,
Uh oh.
but in the Bond world. And
Okay.
I like to call it Dear Money Penny. You
Okay.
ready?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. Dear Money Penny, I am a huge James Bond fan, and the person I'm interested in isn't. What would be the best way to tell them I'm a huge fan that won't frighten them off?
Um, well, first of all, just be honest about it. I feel like when you hide stuff like that from your partner, it isn't helpful. And if for some reason they're like totally weirded out or against it, they're probably not the person for you. I do think that talking about like, I mean, the Bond fandom can become quite pricey if you're looking at the clothes, the gadgets, and all of that. So also having a discussion about financials with that is important. But yeah, I would just go out and say it. And how do you know if you've never talked about it that they're not a Bond fan? Maybe they're interested in learning more about the community. So I think just communication and honesty. And if it's something that's like a total deal breaker for them, they probably were not the right person for you.
Yeah, that's great advice. I mean, people need to accept you for who you are, right?
Exactly. Mhm.
So before we end, is there anything else you'd like to add?
No, I'm just kind of curious about all the books behind you. What are they?
Oh, I'm actually in my husband's office. So,
Okay.
yeah, he has a lot of history books. Oops, big chair. Actually, these are Star Trek tiki mugs, and we've got his like cards and stuff, and
Oh, okay.
yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And then yeah, my husband's a big Star Trek fan, and
Okay.
he's also a big history fan. So actually up here, he's got a whole bunch of books from Winston Churchill, and then like history, business, economy. Like he's that kind of person. So
It's a really nice office.
oh yeah. Oh, and then down here he's got like talking about crime and mystery. These are Agatha Christie books. Like he's really
Oh,
into Poirot.
okay.
So we watch a lot of like we we've seen all of Poirot, and he really likes the 1920s like murder mystery type of shows.
Oh,
So
okay.
yeah,
Fun. So you
yeah,
both have your own little thing, right? Because you're Bond and then he has his. Yeah.
yeah, absolutely, yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean like he indulges in my Bond, my Bond hobby, and I mean he likes the like the quote unquote high society, type of things like going out for fancy dinners and having nice drinks and and the Bond locations too. Like he loves to travel, so that makes it easy. Like I think that's the one great thing about Bond is like when they visit the different countries in the movies is like it's such a beautiful destination anyway. Like it's worth
Yeah.
going to, and he loves to travel, so
Yeah. Yeah. Before COVID, we'd been talking about taking like a European trip and doing like a Bond destination, which to me is like I love to travel as well and visit new places. So pretty much all of them are super interesting. So it would have indulged my love of travel, and then Corey would have gotten to see a Bond destination. But now with COVID, who knows when we're going to be able to do that again? At some point, I'm sure, but it might be a while still.
yeah. Could probably do a road trip or something like that.
We can't leave our province.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so travel's restricted. So if you leave the province, you need to quarantine for 2 weeks wherever you're going, like in whichever other province you're going. So until that opens up, we can't even cross the border into the next province to see our families right now. So
Oh, that must be so hard.
yeah, it was a weird Christmas this year because of that, but it was quiet and relaxing at the same time. And I baked like way too many cookies, so it was good in its own way.
Well, hopefully things will get better this year.
I think so. I feel confident that at some point in 2021, we're going to see the light at the end of the tunnel about this.
Yeah. I mean, I think we've had a whole year to kind of adjust to everything, and hopefully, it'll be the up and up, as I mean, getting used to it. We should be used to it and being able to move forward.
Yeah, I hope so.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you, Danielle, for taking the time to chat with me today.
You're very welcome. Thanks for having me on.
It was a lot of fun, and it was wonderful to have another female's perspective on the world of James Bond. I hope we can collaborate again in the future.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah, and tell us, Danielle, where can we find you?
You can reach out to us. We're another James Bond podcast on Instagram, another James Bond podcast, or yeah, another James Bond podcast at gmail.com as well if you want to reach us by email. If you're interested in true crime, my podcast is Crime and Mystery Canada. So that's pretty much it.
Great. All right. Well, thank you everyone for watching, and be safe and take care. Until next time. Bye.
Bye.
I was just thinking about how he kills the guy. He has a magic ramp where it goes from stairs and it switches to slide.
Yeah.
And imagine if his shoes were like sticky, and like he'd be like, like stuck, and he wouldn't be able to do the cool thing he did. It's like he must have known either that he did something to his shoes. Like if it were me, it would be disaster. Like I would just fall over and.
He probably buys his shoes based on that. Takes like 5 pairs home and just tests them on the fly to make sure that they actually don't stick. And then he returns 3 pairs because they didn't work properly.
Like, it would be great though, a really slow, squeaky gym shoe slide down there, just like, and you're like, sorry, this is supposed to be more dramatic. And then you just let me to the bottom before you shoot me. Like, yeah, okay. Break fall, got my gun. Yeah.